Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
Hello, everybody. This is Sandy. I am a dating and love coach at lastfirstdate.com. And I want to welcome you to Last First Date Radio. We are a featured show about attracting and sustaining healthy relationships in midlife. Every week I bring you in-depth interviews with top experts and cutting-edge authors in the field of dating and relationships. And today I'm going to be speaking with matchmakers and dating coaches and also dear friends Peggy and Richard Wolman about the best texting advice for mature daters. Really important topic. So many people have questions about when to text, what to text, how to text. Do I even need to text? So this is going to be a great show. And as a dating coach, I love helping women over 40 become more confident and really value themselves so they can have the healthy, lasting, loving relationships that they want. So if you are listening and you are a woman over 40, please stop listening to any dating advice you hear that tells you that you need to become thinner or smarter or wittier in order to find love. Please stop believing that love is only going to come to you when you really change yourself into something that you're not, because if you are looking for an authentic, deep connection, you will find that when you actually become more you instead of less you. When you really uncover your true gifts and your true amazingness, because that's what your ideal partner is going to connect with. And this goes for men too. There are really wonderful men out there. If you're listening and you're a man, we love you. And, so I really encourage you all to just, take the masks off, uncover who you are, and really get vulnerable and have the deep connections that you're seeking. Every week I bring you a tip on how to be a woman of value. So today's tip is to stop doing everything for everyone and learn how to delegate. Now, this was a hard one for me. I used to be the one who did everything for everybody, and then I would get resentful when people wouldn't do things back for me. So learning how to delegate and ask for what you want clearly and with grace, that is such an important part of my growth, and it's what I encourage all of you to do. So 2 more things before we get to our guests. If you want to become a woman of value who attracts her best partner, I invite you to go over to lastfirstdate.com and sign up for my new free guide. It's called The Top 10 Reasons Why Men Pull Away and How You Can Finally Attract and Keep the Love You Deserve. Stop sabotaging your love life and start taking back your control by being a true woman of value, and men will start disappearing much less. And if they do, you won't care. I also invite you to join my private Facebook group, which is called Your Last First Date. So all you have to do is go to facebook.com/groups/Your Last First Date, or just search in the search bar for Your Last First Date. We have almost 800 women in the group now, and it's a really positive place to come for support. Just talk out anything, especially issues like texting. So we are now going to introduce you to Peggy and Richard Wolman. They have been married for 50 years. They have 4 married kids, lots of grandkids, and they have mutual respect and commitment and open communication. And they bring those values to their matchmaking and dating and relationship coaching services at Peggy Wolman Matchmaking. Welcome to the show, my friends.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.
Nice to be here.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah,
Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you. And Peggy, this is your second appearance on my show, so great to have you. And Richard, I'm so happy to have you both here together today. So let's get into it. Texting. It's part of today's culture, whether we like it or not. People are really into it, and we want to talk today about how texting plays out for women and men who are over 40, over 50, who don't have the experience or confidence about how to write or read or interpret text. So what do you offer about how to do any of that stuff?
Well, I'll jump in first. I was thinking about it a lot, and a lot of people often ask us, what are some of the differences between older adults and dating and younger people who are dating, who are, especially for older adults, what we call re-entering the dating world. And I think in this one particular area, I think older adults may have the advantage. And I think, for me, the reason I think that is because for younger daters, texting is their world. So it's really not a question of do I or don't I, or what I would say or what I wouldn't say, or how to text. They've pretty much developed their own skills, and although they might not be in combination, a perfect combination with the person with whom they're texting, they have a style and it's a language that they're comfortable using. But for older adults, as you said, there are so many different levels and layers of experience and history. But I think that works to an advantage, because it really does mean that pretty much before you do any texting, you have to talk about it, or we suggest you should talk about it, other than texting about logistics. But I think that it puts it out on the table very early, because you both may have an entirely different view and background, and it can be an interesting conversation and an interesting topic. So I think, for me, that's one piece of it as a place to start.
So let me just interrupt you here for a minute. I just want to recap what you're saying here. So you're saying that the advantage that older daters have is that because they're not as familiar with texting or as comfortable with texting, that there's a forced sort of conversation around texting before you even get started. Is that what you're meaning?
Right, and not necessarily forced in a way that would be uncomfortable, but reaching out and finding out how each person uses texts and what they use them for and whether or not they enjoy it before they get too involved in actually doing it is quite comfortable for older adults, because it's newer in their lives than it is for younger daters. It's not that they're probably not texting, but they're not sure how to be texting on dates, and the only way, I think, to figure that out is to explore it as a conversation.
Right.
Early
so I
on.
agree with you, and I think what happens often is that what I see from the woman's side is they get stuck in this texting loop and they don't bring it up. They're afraid to bring it up. So how would you suggest someone might bring this up in a way that's kind and gentle?
Well, I'll say one, and then I want Richard to chime in, because he's got some really helpful views on this. But I think that it's not too difficult, I think. So if you receive a first text from someone, we're talking about either pre-date or post-date now, I would always respond sort of in kind to what I received. If you receive a text that, it was such a nice evening and I enjoyed meeting you too, you might say, thank you, I enjoyed meeting you. But pre-date, other than about the logistics, being early or being late or not being able to find where you're going, I hope that they're not texting before the date. And we haven't found that happens very much, that there's too much texting going on before a date. But I think then when you see someone, that you have a chance to say, one of the features of re-entering the dating world that I find the most interesting and sometimes challenging is texting. And I wouldn't even say, how about you? Because you know how we feel about asking too many questions. I would just put it out there as a statement and see how the person that you're with, how does your date feel about it? Does he say, I can't live without it, I text every day, this is, sort of how I communicate with people? And all of a sudden you're talking about, it's a topic and a conversation about something that has some meaning in your lives, which is how you communicate. Mm-hmm. And I think for me that would work as a relatively simple way to sort of bring that up.
Yeah, I like that.
Is that?
Yeah, and leaving it open. Mm-hmm.
Leaving it open, and then why it's so important to bring the topic of texting up and have a chance to talk about something that's more than just a fun experience you had yesterday, or where you're going tomorrow, or whatever. You're talking about communication, and then Richard might want to chime in here a little bit about how why this form of communication, how when you're talking about it, these might be a couple of the kinds of things that you might want to share.
Mhm. Okay, Richard, take it away.
So, I had a couple thoughts about it, listening to what Peggy was saying about the different generations. And I think for older adults, texting is really an acquired taste. Younger adults use texting, they're comfortable with texting, and for older adults, they have to learn about texting. And actually, I think many older adults, if not most, have kids. And a lot of the texting that they've learned how to do is with their kids. And it goes back and forth, and I think for some people, they've found it to be very, very useful, very expedient, and a very convenient way to communicate. But then when you get into a dating situation, the question is, can you text somebody that you've just met or been out with a couple of times in the same way that you would text your kids? And if you can, fine. If you can't, are there different kinds of rules or different kinds of expectations? Now, one thing about texting with people that you know, with your kids, for example, is that you know them very well. You have a very intimate relationship with your own children, or with your wife's kids if it's a second marriage. But you don't have that same kind of intimate relationship with the person that you've just met. The problem with texting is that it gives the impression, and can often give the impression, of intimacy that has not really been earned and is not part of a historical relationship. So I would say that you can't really take the same kind and quality of texting that you use with people that you know very well, specifically your children, and just import it wholeheartedly and wholesale into the new kind of relationship. So a new relationship is one in which I would think you'd want to tread carefully with texting. Find out what texting is like for the other person. You can find it out in a lot of ways. You can talk about how you feel when you text your own family or your own kids. Find out how that person feels about how they use texting. And make sure that at least if you don't text in the same way as the person that you've just met, that you at least understand how he or she uses texting in their relationships.
Mhm. That's a good point. And I think that what you just said also about giving the impression of intimacy that's not yet earned, that is such an important point. And this happens a lot in beginning relationships where people start getting very intimate very quickly. And I know that it's a common complaint among my clients, like it just feels really uncomfortable and uncalled for because it's not yet developed. So I think, it's
right.
important.
I'm not even talking about sexual intimacy. I'm just talking about the quality of intimacy that, as you said, it can be very uncomfortable. If somebody texts you, 4 or 5 times a day and you just met him a week ago, there's something very unsettling about that for many people.
Yeah, and it's because it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like you're really seeing the person.
Exactly.
You're projecting
or
whatever.
It's not real. Right. Because it's not real. Because it's not real. And I think that's where, as you said, I think women in particular do get into a lot of trouble with this because they read this as a cue, a signal of how much this fellow cares for you, how much the guy cares for you, but is now being evaluated by the number of times that he texts and even often ignoring even the content of the texts, or looking at them closely, and not recognizing that these aren't thoughtful texts. These are just some playful whatever that's going on, and sometimes they are thoughtful texts. And I think what happens is that we have to spend. They're so nuanced for everybody that the language of texting, especially for older adults. I mean, I think what Richard said is, we have a style of doing it that's with our family members, but how we use that same style in the outside world, we have this incredible tension because we know how we've been taught and trained to communicate, particularly on paper, which would be more like an email. So we tend to be very polite, and certainly not use, abbreviated everything in a text. And what happens, I think, for older adult women is they read these texts, and it says thank you for a lovely evening, and there's no punctuation, and the U is the letter U, and it didn't say very much, and it didn't say I look forward to seeing you again, and it's so nuanced by your interpretation and your translation. And so if you don't understand how someone else uses it, we really try to steer women away from using it until you've had some kind of conversation about it, and we'll help you to have a conversation about it.
A conversation in person. In
person, if you can. Yeah. I mean, if they're already texting you, can't wait to see you tomorrow night, you don't have to write back, me too. You just wait till tomorrow night. Leave some mystery. You don't even know who he is yet.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There's so much interpretation because there's no tone to email or text. And to have a grown-up relationship, we really need to talk. And we need to see each other as soon as possible. And so I always encourage women to let a man know what they want. If a man starts texting a lot, to say, the way I really get to know a man is by speaking on the phone and then getting to meet you as soon as possible if we feel a connection. If they're meeting online, that kind of thing. And because, to me, when I hear a man who's connecting with me say, "Can we get off text? This is not a conversation." I'm like, yes, this is a man who understands, and they get brownie points for that. So we definitely have to speak up and ask for what we want. So let's talk about the texts that do work. So when do texts work?
Well, I think they definitely work for me. I advocate, certainly for anything that has to do with logistics. The train is running late. I couldn't find the restaurant that you suggested. I'm down the street. I'm sorry I'm going to be a little late tonight. I had to see a late patient. Whatever that has to do with logistics. I think it's really thoughtful and a very nice thing to let someone know. So that's certainly a time that they do work. And I do think after a date that if you haven't talked about it on the first date, if for some reason you didn't feel comfortable or just didn't come up in the right way, and maybe and you do want to communicate with him that you had a lovely evening, my preference would be to do it either over the phone or over email, but you may even get a text from him first. And in which case, if you do, I think it's, you would respond. I think the biggest piece of advice is to respond in kind. If he writes one sentence, you write one sentence. That you're not the one that's extending it. I think this is true for email too. But just, I had a lovely evening. It was so nice to meet you. I look forward to seeing you again. And you just say, thank you so so much. I had a lovely evening, too, and look forward to seeing you all, too. That's it. Just no more, no less. And I've been wondering about how men look at the emoticons. Do they like the little emojis or don't they? And, I hear different things from men, whether they do or they don't. Women tend to like them, use them. They like to see a smile. They like to give a smile. My inclination is to say, if you're so inclined, and I think what you said before is true, shouldn't be changing things about yourself for someone. But if you're so inclined, use one though. Don't get so. I don't want them to look too lighthearted, too childish, too whatever. So if you want to use one in an email, use one. That would be my piece of advice about that.
So Match.com, I think, had a study a few years ago that emoticons actually help people have love much quicker and much more often. That there's something about the playfulness, I think, of emojis that leads people to connecting in a more playful, loving way. And
emojis provide the emotional context that the actual text cannot do. So it helps with the misinterpretation, because if you write something in a text and the other person isn't clear whether or not you're being deadly serious or whether you're being playful, the emoji gives a clue as to what the emotion behind the words really means, and I think that makes it easier to use text in a user-friendly way.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it helps to bring emotional context. I also have seen emojis act as a passive-aggressive way of writing. So writing something kind of mean and then putting a smiley face after it to soften it. That really bothers me. But that's also something that you can pick up on and you can ask about, when you see somebody in person. So we're texting.
Or you can forget that person.
Oh, right.
That's a pretty mean thing to do.
Yeah, it is a mean thing to do.
And rather than ask that person, I think I might be inclined to bring that insight to, if you're going to, the next time you see that person, not as an ask, but more as a, I felt myself. It didn't feel good, and it felt a bit awkward for me when I read your sentence and then the emoji, because I wasn't quite sure how to interpret it. And let him have to respond to what he did. You may have misinterpreted it, because we so often do, or if it was something mean and then followed by it. He said, after I wrote it, I thought to myself, that wasn't my best. Men are nervous too, and they wonder so much about what their communication sounds like or reads like, or are they saying too much, too little? Should they not have said it? Should they use? They go through a lot of the same confusion and trying to make these decisions that women do.
Yeah, all you have to do is read Aziz Ansari's book on modern romance. He's got a section in there about what it was like for him waiting for the text back from this lady he met and was very attracted to. And he documents it. The first hour went by, he was okay. Second hour, he was getting nervous. Third hour, he still hadn't heard from her. Fourth hour, and on and on and on. It's A, hilarious, and B, it's a little too close to home for a lot of people.
Yeah. I actually love his book. There's a lot of wisdom in there. It's not all just comedy. It's actually quite wise. And
there's
I
a lot of
Peggy
data too.
Yeah, exactly. And Peggy, I just wanted to say that I like how you keep bringing us back to not asking so many questions, but just bringing up points in a statement that gets him to have to answer without asking a question directly. So why do you encourage that?
I statement.
an I statement.
An I statement, because you said it. I think you always articulate that point so well, coming from a place of confidence and self-awareness, and sort of being able to figure out what your needs are and whether or not you're going to be able to get some of these needs met by the person that you're meeting. And I think the only way that you can do that is if you're putting out there some of the passions and feelings and opinions that you have, and then to see how they're acknowledged and appreciated. And that's how you build the relationship. You don't build the relationship by, finding out, everything there is to know about another person, by just sort of asking him everything about what's going on in his life and his children and his whatever, and his work and his whatever. It's more about putting out there what it is you want someone to know about you, and then looking and considering whether or not this is someone who is appreciating and enjoying what you're saying.
Yeah.
In my view. In our view, we advocate that strongly for our clients, men and women. But women in particular, who are natural-born interrogators, and all we do is ask questions all the time, and we think we are, and that we think everybody's enjoying that so much that it's showing how curious we are and how interested we are in the other person. When in fact,
well, it's a new breed of prosecuting attorneys, if you know what I mean.
Oh, man. Got to make dating fun again, right?
It has to be fun, and it's fun if you put yourself in it, not by asking the other person to jump in first, but by jumping in yourself, saying what you like, saying what you want to do, saying what you don't want to do. If you like to text, fine. If you don't, and putting it out on the table and then seeing how the other person responds, because the goal of this whole dating enterprise, in my view, is reciprocity. You want to be able to give to somebody, and you want to be able to let them give to you, and meet in a mutually fun, pleasurable, growth-inducing format. If one person's doing all the reaching out and the giving and the interrogating and the other person isn't, it's out of balance. And so reciprocity for me, and this is what I talk to our clients about, is how one can establish a really comfortable and interesting kind of relationship, and then you'll see where it goes. You don't know where it's going to go, obviously, but you see where it goes. But it needs to have balance to start.
Yeah,
definitely. Well
and
said.
Texting, and texting, if you think of it, it's hard. I feel with texting, you almost immediately have to do a little bit of what you said at the beginning of the program. You said, women, if you think you need to get skinny and you think you need to do this, and forget it. You need to be authentic and true to yourself. And I think one of the problems with texting is that it's not like French. French, you're learning a language, it's a language. It's the way that you speak it. Texting has so many variations, and as we acknowledged, it's so nuanced, but it's like so many different languages. So the style with which you text becomes a language, and if you don't speak the same language the other person speaks, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to communicate with each other and in a way that's going to be successful. One of you is going to end up feeling, it sounded so curt. He doesn't use any punctuation. He just said, "Had fun. Hope you did too." And that person, he meant that as sincerely as you might write it, which was, "I had such a nice time tonight. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see you again." Whatever it is. If you met that person in an elevator and you had a conversation with that person and you were instantly kind of attracted to each other and you thought, let's go for coffee, you would have no idea about this person's style of texting. And that's why you can't, in my view, women can't use one signal, one piece of information, like how he texts. I could never go out with this guy again. I can't stand the way he texts me. But I say try not to use one piece of information as a reason not to see someone again. Because think about what it would be like if you met this person in person and you didn't have the kind of data that you have. And I think texting, because it's just has, a million of its own vocabulary words and ways of expression and style and emojis and everything, it's just too hard to translate. I think what Richard said is true, is that it creates a false sense of intimacy very quickly.
Yeah, or pushing somebody away. So I agree, and it's not just about texting, because this happens on dating sites where people send the first message, and it's like a text. And on many phone apps, it is a text. And so we're making judgments based on an opening conversation that could have nothing to do with the person's true personality. I had something like that happen to me yesterday. Somebody reached out to me, and he's from another country, so he didn't have fluid language skills, and I wanted to speak to him on the phone because he seemed like he had some great qualities. And our phone conversation was so much more rich and interesting than anything he could have written in an opening conversation. So just having that openness and being able to assess somebody based on first, how they sound, but also getting in front of them as soon as possible. And to me, texting also does have a place once you're in a relationship and you want to send a sweet text or good morning text, a good night text, a sexy text. You already know each other's language, and it's so much easier to do at that point. What do you have to say about that before we wrap up?
And it's flirty and friendly.
Yes. Right. So there's a place for it then because you know each other, right? And you know each other's language, and you're not going to have as many misunderstandings.
Absolutely. It's a wonderfully fun and easy way of being in touch with someone you care about. But first you have to have a relationship that you know something about, I think, before you can be in that place.
I agree. So I think people have to really look at those false intimacy building texts and stop doing that and save the intimacy and the texting for later in a relationship and really get to speaking and not having all these misinterpretations. Really great talking to you guys, as always. And if you would like to leave our audience with one final statement from each of you, I would love to hear that, and then tell everybody how they can find you.
My final statement is that texting can be fun, and it can also be dangerous, so be careful. Learn how to do it, and learn how to use it in an effective way.
Great.
And I think my final message would be, even though it might feel awkward, try to find a way to talk about texting. And if you can have a conversation about it, I think it will be a worthwhile conversation and will likely grow your relationship one way or the other.
Yeah. Good advice.
It's fun. It can be a fun conversation for older adults. It's a more recent chapter. And I think it's wonderful to be able to talk about something that's a more recent chapter and not too far back in your lives anyway. So I think it can serve a great purpose.
Yeah, that's another important reminder. We can have a whole show about not talking about your past, but
right, exactly.
Yep.
Or at least being discerning about what you want to talk about.
Yeah, what you share and really who you are and who you've become to me is so much more interesting than, who you were. I want to know who you are today. That's what's interesting to me. Great. Well, thank you so much, and tell our audience how they can reach you guys.
Peggy Wolman Matchmaking.com. We do matchmaking and dating coaching and relationship coaching for older adults, and we love our work, and it's a joy and a privilege to meet singles who are daring and want to get back into the world of dating.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Happy New Year. And,
you're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today.
Thank you, Sandy. And
my pleasure.
Thank you, Sandy. You do some wonderful work. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Sandy.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a great day, everybody, and I hope you go on your last first date very soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.